there's so much that we have in common that we don't really look at. We spend more time looking at what we don't have in common. And the one thing we all know, we all hurt, we all love, we all cry, we all get hungry. And we all get sick. Now, my boy, 10 years ago, at the breaking point of my building company, everything started falling. My 10-year-old was diagnosed with a rare disease. And they told me that he wouldn't live past 3 years old. So you imagine this, you've got a 10-year gap between your kids. I wouldn't leave the hospital side. And my little Benjamin, they're telling me, isn't going to make it. So it was the most challenging time of my life. Do I try to save the business, or do I spend as much time as I can with my little one? Well, I made the choice. And in that time, God did something amazing. Because when the doctors told me that he wouldn't make it, the physicians said he wouldn't make it, pediatrician said that there's no way he was going to make it, God had other plans. And I remember just crying out, said, I'll do whatever it takes if you just take this away from him. And shortly after about 6-7 months of, what happened every 3 hours, we'd have to turn the clock on to make sure he wouldn't go into a deep sleep, because if he slept for more than 3 hours, he could go into a coma. So it was a pretty tormenting time for us as a family.
High-strung situations that you're always in,
So when people say, you don't know what it's like to do it tough, let me tell you, I know what it's like to have nothing on the table. I know what it's like to sit there and sacrifice whatever you have to make sure that child's okay. And it got to the point where our miracle came. But when that miracle came, we just lost everything that we built, everything that I'd worked so many years for. And we couldn't even get a rental property. So you imagine, we couldn't get a rental property, spent all my life out there helping people wherever I could, regardless whether I was wealthy or not wealthy. I never stopped giving.
Your generosity wasn't based on what you had.
It was just, that's the way God placed me. This is the way I am. But in saying that, that was the beginning, it was a birthing, I guess, of what God had planned for me. And when we first got into our rental property, it was the first rental property we'd had since we'd come out of owning our own place. And it was about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and I remember sitting down praying, and I heard like something just calling me out to the street, just like go out and get them, go out and get them. And my wife at the time said to me, look how cold it is. Look how cold it is, and we've got a heater, we've got this, we've got blankets. These poor fellas on the street, And we just came out of motels and that, so you understand we've been shuffling with kids and newborn motels. So at that time, you start to feel like, man, I know what it's like to have nobody there to pick you up.
Feel defeated.
You feel like, and as a man, let me tell you something. As a man, we are told to suck it up. As men, we're told, that we have to be the rock. But when everything caves around you, failure sets in. And it's pretty hard for most men to actually move forward when failure sets in. So when we hit the city, I couldn't believe we'd rocked into the city and started driving around. And I've always been like one to go out, and my eyes were always drawn to the broken, the lost, the people that were sort of not so popular. I'd always see somebody sitting on their own and want to sort of converse with them. But when I drove around the city this night, I remember it was about 11 o'clock. I had my wife, the 2 kids and the baby, and my newborn, Orlando, was in the stomach, and
in the oven.
In the oven, he was baking. He was baking, and we just drove around, and we drove around the whole city. I'm talking about every single spot that you could imagine. I went for walks in the subways, the parks, all the way from Wentworth Park, Waterloo. And all I could see was how many lost and broken souls were out there. These people were someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's father, someone's mother. And I thought to myself, how did they get to this? But first I thought, how can I help them?
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I rocked up and we didn't have much. I'd made a pot of pasta thinking I was going to feed a few people.
Oh.
And this is where my miracle came, because I'd rocked up in the middle of Martin Place and I didn't know what I was going to do, right? So I turned around, I set up a table and I put the pasta, and next minute I look up and there's 100 people in my line.
Wow.
All I could see was like 6 or 7 people.
Yeah.
And next minute there's like nearly 100 people in the line.
Come out of the woodworks.
And I thought to myself, how am I going to feed them? I haven't got enough food.
Yeah.
So I turned around and I just said, oh, look, let me see what I can do. And I walked away from the table and I looked at my wife at the time and I said, look, I'm not sure what we're going to do from here. And within an hour, Fox Studios were doing this massive banquet down at the studio. They rocked up with this van and said, look, we've got all this food. Can you use it?
Just out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Didn't even know I was going to be there.
Shouts out to Fox Studios.
Yeah,
and feeding the homeless.
But how? Like what? What was the encounter?
They drove up and they said, could you use any
of this? Because they saw you feeding some people,
they saw
thinking,
us feeding
okay,
the
wait a
thing.
sec.
And they said, look, we've got all these fresh rolls, sandwiches, this. And I said, oh, how much food you got? And they opened the van. I went, we'll take it.
Yeah.
I said, we'll take it.
Yeah.
And I had this. And so what happened, I started with a little table. Then all the homeless started bringing milk crates. And we set up another little bed.